Next, from the state capitol, we speak with Tanya Dawood of the Illinois Retail Merchants Association about pending legislation, including the proposal to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour and the so-called Right to Know Act, which would inform individuals of the information that is being gathered when they visit a website. We are here at the Capitol as the ostensibly, at least the official version of the legislative session is winding down. There's a number of issues aside from the budget that I think people may want to be aware of. One, which I think people have an easy time understanding, is the minimum wage.
Yes.
And as we just take this, the House debated an increase in the minimum wage and passed that out of the House.
Yes.
What is the perspective of the Retail Merchants Association on that bill?
Yeah, so we have long been opposed to the many variations of the increase in the minimum wage. Frankly, to put it very short and sweet, this is an increase in labor costs without some corresponding increase in revenue for the business. And so it sets sort of an artificial floor, if you will, and the business owner is going to have to figure out either how to increase revenue in correspondence with this floor that's been set by the legislature, or they're going to have to make some very tough cuts.
Now, for those who haven't followed the bill, what are the incremental increases over what period of time?
Right, and so it's basically a 5-year increase to get to $15. And so it basically starts at $9 in 2018 and goes to $15 in 2022.
And the minimum wage currently in Illinois is what?
It's $8.25, so it's $1 above the federal minimum wage.
So it would go up to by basically around $7 more per hour over
5 years.
Over
5 years span.
For every dollar, if people work full time, that's 2,000 hours a year. So for every dollar an hour, that's an additional $2,000 a year. So we're talking about raising it by almost $7 over a 5-year period. So every worker would cost a business an additional $14,000 a year in just the labor, not to mention the other costs, higher Social Security matching costs and all. Have you put a dollar figure on how much this would take out of the retail merchants around the state?
Well, it's hard to quantify because each retailer is very different. But what I will say is that the city of Chicago has its own law to increase the wage to eventually to $13, and it's been doing so for the last couple of years. And we have spoken to business owners there. They actually came as a part of a task force that Mayor Emanuel put together to discuss paid sick leave, adding paid sick leave on top of it. And what the business owners told us is that first thing they tried to do was increase prices. But there's only so much that you can increase prices. And then after they did that, they said, well, we'll have to cut employee hours. And so that's what happened. So basically what happened, at least in the city of Chicago, and I think it will inform what will happen across the state, is those employees that are working at or near the minimum wage now will see their hours cut so that there actually isn't a net gain for the employee. They're making more per hour, but they're working less hours. And that's not a result, I think, that the advocates want. But when you look at the economics of raising labor costs, in retail it's about 20%, restaurants it's about 30%, that money has to come from somewhere. And so we've seen employers make some pretty hard decisions in the city of Chicago, and I think that we will see very similar action taken across the state.
Those who favor the increase would say it's not right that people should be working full time and be basically living at a poverty level. What would you say to that argument?
So when we're talking about jobs that are either at or near the minimum wage, we're often talking about sort of low-skilled jobs. And so the folks who are working in those jobs generally are first-time entrants into the market, or they're for a very short period of time. That's what the jobs are sort of engineered for. They're not engineered for someone who is raising a family, paying a mortgage, that kind of thing. These are places where you start, but hopefully they're not places where you stay. And so to that extent, to the extent that someone is raising a family and paying a mortgage on minimum wage, we think that is regrettable. But again, if they are in that job, the point of it is to either grow within the company or move on, right? And so it's a place to allow folks who are new entrants in the market to gain a skill set that they can then take to the next place or hire within the company to make a higher wage and eventually be able to make that wage that does allow a person who's working full time to do the things that all Americans want to do, which is have families and be able to support themselves. And so I don't want to confuse the issue. You know what I mean? When we're talking about minimum wage, we're talking about very specific segment of jobs, and those jobs are not the kinds of jobs that people should be working if they want to raise children and support a family.
Before we move on, one last question on minimum wage. Has IRMA or other business organizations, I presume you might talk to other people in the business community about this issue as they would also be impacted, discussed any kind of a compromise position where you might say, look, if you're a head of household, that's one thing, but we don't need to be going to $15 an hour for kids just going through high school or looking to make enough money to take go on a date on Friday night?
Well, the studies show overwhelmingly that most people who are working at or near the minimum wage are not actually supporting families. They are adding to the household income, but they are not the ones that are providing in total for the household income. So I want to make sure that we get that on the record. And I think that we don't want to complicate minimum wage law. You know what I mean? We should set a wage and leave it there. And then, temporarily, should the occasion arise to raise it, you do. But frankly, we think that wages ought to be set on a federal level like they are in all of the other countries that have such sort of base wages. Because it should be a standard for where the country operates. And so to have varying wages, whether it be at the state level or at the local level, we think that frankly, the policy should be set nationally, and that goes for sick leave as well. And again, all of the other countries that have sick leave policies, it's set nationally.
Let's turn to another issue that the Illinois Channel has already focused on somewhat, and that is the idea that should people who go to a website be informed of the information that is being gathered about them when they visit any website. I think a lot of people would automatically say yes, but they don't necessarily know the back end of the implications. And I should also say that over the Memorial Day weekend, as we're taping this, we're just back from that weekend, but that bill died in the House over the weekend, but I think there's some discussion that it could be coming back as an amendment, so we wanted to pursue it with you. What's wrong with having a bill that says the right to know when you go to a website what information is being gathered about you as an individual that would then be gathered and resold to other third parties?
Right. So the issue here is that we offered a compromise. The state of California has sort of a similar bill. It's called California Shine the Light Law, and that requires companies to respond to customer inquiries about what information has been shared and or sold to third parties for direct marketing purposes, because that's the thing that people are sort of most concerned about. You're selling my information to someone who wants to market something to me, and I want to know who you've done that with. And so, but this bill goes much farther. It's much broader than that. And they haven't given us a reason why it needs to be expanded. And so we said, listen, if you do California Shine the Light Law, at the very least, Illinois has done something critical that it doesn't have today. But they they shot for the moon and the stars. And when, even taking Shine the Light in California, that requires a business to sort of build out a software backend because you have to figure out what information is being shared and respond inquiry by inquiry, right? And that's a lot of time, that's a lot of money, that's a lot of investment that should be spent on protecting the information that we are already collecting. That's what really protecting the consumer is about, is making sure that whatever we have, we are protecting so that it's not breached. And it's a very difficult thing to do. Because there's people out there every day working very hard to breach the information that we're collecting. And
well, and isn't the impact would be what the cost would be of those who run websites at a small end
absolutely.
to comply with the law? So there's a question of the cost of compliance. Is
yes,
that not?
There's a question of the cost of compliance and the need, honestly, because for what's being happened, consumers are fairly savvy. They know that information is sort of being shared. Frankly, this is sort of a new way of doing what we've always been doing. So right now we're talking about the Internet of Things, but prior to that, we were sharing information all the time, and that's why you get some of the circulars that you get, and that's why you get some of the magazines that you get, and all that promotional material. So this kind of work has been going on for a long time. It's just now being brought into the Internet of Things space. And I think what it is about that is sometimes consumers don't understand how the Internet of Things works, and so it gives them a level of uncomfortability. But what we're saying is it's very important to us to make sure that the information that we have is kept safe, and the information that we share with third parties, whether we're marketing to you or not, is kept safe as well. And there's already law on the books to make sure that we're doing that. And in the event that we don't do that, that same law will require us to do a number of things to make sure that the consumer can go out and further protect their information. So, Illinois has been very serious, and our organization worked very hard with the Illinois Attorney General's office a couple of years ago to get the language of that law where it needs to be. So we've been very proactive in making sure that laws that are really about protecting consumers are out there and are working. This is not really about protecting consumers. And so they confuse, and I think intentionally, personal information with information that is personally identifiable. And there's a very distinct but important difference there. So this would require us to share information that we've probably shared with a third party in the aggregate, meaning there's no way that a third party can trace the information that we've given to an individual. So we may give ages, we may give sort of dates of birth, that kind of thing, but not actually give the person to whom the date of birth corresponds to.
I'll share that the Illinois channel. I can see on YouTube, when people come and visit our videos, what gender they are,
right,
and what country they're from,
right,
but I have no idea who they are individually.
Exactly, but this bill would require us to figure out who that information belongs to and then share that with that person when the information is out there but it's not identifiable to that person. So it's requiring us to do a lot of work for not a lot of benefit to the ultimate consumer. And so we're saying, why don't we focus in on those things that will allow us to make sure that the consumer has some actual protection and not something that looks like protection but really isn't.
I know you got to go to another meeting, so thank you for joining us, and maybe we can follow up another time.
For sure. Thank you.